gold. And when you think about the fact that this soil probably took hundreds of years to form,
Hello, my name is Christine Brown. I'm a field crop sustainability specialist.
welcome back to episode 2 of March Manure Mondays 2026. Glad to have you back. Last week we had a great session and we had folks on speaking about moving manure further and, looked at pipelines, drag lines, frac tanks, satellite tanks, and other ways that you can move manure further. We had a great session, lots of interaction. That session was recorded, was posted on Field Crop News on the YouTube channel, and you can view it there now, along with the 50 plus other people who have already taken a look. So we're thrilled to have you back with us. And this week we have a different topic. We're going to be talking about manure and cover crops. This is the only session where we deal with soil health aspects of manure. And so we're really, really looking forward to a great conversation. Some quick logistics. Just a reminder, session is recorded. Please stay muted, but do stay active in the chat. We love your questions, your comments, and we will pull forward those questions for our discussion at the end. This session has been accredited with a nutrient management credit. So if you are a certified crop advisor, we will post that QR code at the end. As well, if you're part of the off-calf program in Ontario, and you know what that is, then this has been a accredited knowledge sharing event. So 1 KSE credit, that will also be posted as a QR code at the end. So again, please post your questions in the chat as we go along here, but let's jump right into our topic today. We are going to be talking about manure and cover crops. We have 3 folks on the panel. We'll give them each some time to present, and then we'll have open conversation. So first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Laura van Eerd. And Laura is a professor at the University of Guelph Ridgetown campus and has done some wonderful work on soils over the years. And so we're thrilled to have you join us here today, Laura. And I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can jump right into some of the research findings that you have from recent work you've done. Welcome, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Christine, for the invitation. To be fair, there's no manure in this experiment, but I think what we have done really applies in terms of tracing our nitrogen that we applied to the cover crop. Where does that nitrogen go? How much is lost and how much goes to the next corn crop is what I'm looking to answer. Really need to acknowledge my now postdoc fellow, that's Yajin Peng. She did this work. It was her PhD, and really excited to share it with you. I'm going to start with this, which is a high-level view, which is the value of organic matter. If you're using manure, you're adding organic matter. You're feeding the soil biota and increasing soil health. And in a high Soil health soil, we have lots of different pathways to provide your corn with water and with nitrogen compared to, low soil health, then you're really dependent on your chemical fertilizers. And so that's kind of the concept. It's like, okay, yeah, but what does Ontario data show? And so we have a long-term cover crop experiment at Ridgetown. We have to acknowledge that it's in a horticultural system, so we have a high frequency of cover crops. We're in the south, so we've got a big window to grow cover crops. But what we saw after planting cover crops 11 times in 15 years was the corn was hurting for nitrogen where we had no cover crop. And so you can see on the screen where the corn is shorter, it's deficient of nitrogen, less green, compared to where we had long-term cover crops. And so this was corn grown with just pre-plant nitrogen fertilizer in 20 and 2021. So we have two side-by-side long-term experiments. So really powerful data set to look at nitrogen contributions to the corn crop. And so we kind of asked, how much is coming from the long-term cover crops? How much is coming from that increase in soil health, that increase in soil organic matter or organic carbon? And we saw quite a bit of difference in terms of corn growth, corn yield, and that was related to soil organic carbon. And so here we've got a zero. The zero line is we base it compared to the no cover crop. And then we measured soil organic stocks with the long-term cover crops. And so what we saw is at the 0 to 30 centimeter depth and even down to 60 centimeter depth, we saw increase in soil organic matter and soil organic carbon with long-term cover crops. And so this was work on a sandy loam soil type here at Ridgetown, 14% increase. But there's a lot of work coming out of North America that shows similar levels, 12% increase in soil organic matter with using cover crops. And so that led us to wonder, what is the nitrogen benefit of this increased organic matter, this increased carbon? And so we set up a tracer experiment. So this one is, specialized fertilizer, kind of like in medicine, they use tracers to highlight where things are going in the body. We can do this in our field experiments with this N15 labeled fertilizer tracer. And so we applied this fertilizer after wheat harvest and in small little plots so we could measure where that fertilizer went after wheat harvest. And then we planted a cover crop. And so now we have these micro plots where we can trace the fertilizer. We applied mineral fertilizer and we quantified how much went into the cover crop, how much was left in the soil, and then how much would be lost from the system, lost from the field. And so here you can see the list of cover crops we tested, but really the main difference was, did you have a cover crop or didn't you? The species after the long term didn't make a big difference. It was just plant a cover crop. And so because we can quantify how much the crop took up and how much is left in the soil, we can estimate losses. And what we found was by late fall, so end of October, cover crops reduced nitrogen losses by 70%. So to my mind, that's a huge number. And this is a consistent number, right? Studies up in Elora with lysimeters show 70%. Studies in Quebec and at Purdue in Indiana show 70%. You're minimizing that losses with the cover crop. So then we followed the nitrogen that was from the fertilizer that we applied to the cover crop. We followed that the following spring in the residues and in the soil, and followed it into the corn system. How much did the crop take up? How much was left in the soil? And so, I'll give you a couple of seconds to guess how much of that nitrogen that we applied to the cover crop made its way into the corn crop. We know we stopped losses. All right, so get your guesses in. And perhaps, unfortunately, it's only less than 10% when you have a cover crop planted. And so that's maybe discouraging, but the really good news is that if you have a cover crop in the system, 60% of that nitrogen you gave the cover crop, and in your case, it might have been manure, but 60% is in the soil as the organic matter, as organic nitrogen. And this, I think, is the value of cover cropping, and especially with long-term cover crops. So far, I've kind of compared this no cover crop and then this long-term. But yeah, she had another idea, and that was, what about first-time cover cropping? So what we did was we sacrificed a small area within that no cover crop control, right? We're looking at an aerial photograph. We sacrificed a little area of that no cover crop control. So 15 years hadn't seen a cover crop, and we planted for the first time a cover crop. And we wondered, now we can know which one came from the fertilizer and which one comes from the long-term cover cropping, and then compare that to the first time cover cropping. And so really very, very, well, I'm pretty proud of it, obviously, but I think it's really cool because we can separate whether that nitrogen came from what we applied to the cover crop, and we can say any gains from the first time to the long term was from the soil organic matter that was grown. And I'm kind of giving you a big hint right here in terms of growth. So no cover crop, very deficient. The first time was intermediate, but more similar to the long-term cover crop. And so when we measured pre-plant soil mineral nitrogen content, so that's nitrate and ammonia in the soil just before corn planting, what we saw was that's a stair step if ever I seen one, right? More soil mineral nitrogen with the long-term cover crops. So that organic matter increasing is providing nitrogen to the corn crop. So this was measured at the spring, and then we saw it in the yield as well. And so now here we've got grain yield. Keep in mind, we didn't fertilize the corn crop. And you can say, yeah, Laura, come on, everyone fertilizes corn. And thank you, I know. But we wanted to push the system, right? We wanted to see how much nitrogen is that cover crop, that long-term cover crop providing. And so what we're seeing is, 27 bushels. So greater yields with the long-term cover crop. And it's really due to that soil organic stock. And so we can see here, this is relative to the no cover crop control. as you increase soil organic carbon or soil organic matter, we have greater corn yield. And the previous slide too showed, right, we have less variability with the long-term cover crops. And so yeah, this to me is the value of investing in manure and cover crops. And so I'll leave it there. We've got want to really acknowledge our funding partners who make this research possible. Also need to acknowledge my team, Yajin, Sean, Vink, and others who really allow me to do this, right? Allow me to share these results, allow me to look at the data. It's pretty exciting, and I look forward to your questions. So I'll leave it there.
That's a great intro, Laura. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Some stunning numbers there. Something to get pretty excited about. So we will circle back more in the conversation. So we're going to go to our first farm presenter. I'm going to ask Woody Van Arkel if you want to come on the screen, Woody, and share your presentation. So Woody is a farmer from the Dresden area. And if you're driving down through the Dresden area and you see some weird stuff in a field and you wonder what is going on there, there's probably a good chance that it's one of Woody's properties because he has done some really unique things over the years, really pushing the boundaries, trying some things that haven't been done before. And anyhow, I'm going to turn it over to Woody and let him take you through some of the interesting things that he's been doing. Woody, welcome.
Yes, I'm gonna try to keep the standards up to the Laura and Eerd standards of presentation, but we'll see how I do. I'm gonna start off with what I call my goals for my farm, and it's gonna frame why I do some of the stuff I do, and manure will fall within these parameters or manure applications. So I want to always keep my soil covered as much as possible, whether it's a crop, cover crop, or crop residue. I don't want it exposed to sun, rain, and wind. Uh, I want to do as little tillage as possible, and right now that would be strip till in when needed, I guess. Uh, I also want to keep a living root system growing in my fields as much as possible, 365 days a year, albeit maybe dormant in the winter, but still alive. And one of the reasons is, Laura touched on it, is to take up that fertility that the manure is putting down and keep it in my farm. I'm a little bit greedy. I don't want to buy fertilizer, so if I can keep it, that's better. And keep it out of the water because phosphorus in Lake Erie is not a good thing, and my drinking water comes from Lake Erie. So I do things like those buffer strips along my water's edges and things like that as well. Uh, and compaction or reduce compaction or mitigate compaction is something that's becoming more important. Allowing for less compaction allows for better water infiltration, less surface runoff, again, keeping stuff out of the water under the umbrella that it has to make economic sense. When I first started applying manure years ago in my farming career, it was all blown on top out the back of the spreader. And because I live a mile south of the town of Dresden, it really didn't make a lot of friends in town when I was spreading manure because my manure goes out after wheat harvest in the summer. Usually have better soil conditions, and I have a window of time to do it, or I'm not fighting other jobs on the farm. So summertime barbecues and things in town, the smell of manure didn't go over well. So I started injecting manure with big shank injectors. It worked well for getting the manure below surface, but it also created 1, 2, sometimes 3 tillage passes to get the field level again. It also took away all the moisture that happened to be in that field, which can sometimes be limiting in the summertime. So my first attempt to reduce the impact on the soil as part of my ejection system was a little junkyard engineering where I bought a series of Flexicoil single disc openers. I stripped them right down to bare minimum to cut a slot in the ground and allow the manure to at least start to dribble into or soak into the ground without spreading it into the air. Worked well, except for the fact I couldn't get to the speed I wanted to get the application rate that I wanted to apply without breaking discs and other things off, trying to go too fast. So version 2 turned into a series of straight wavy coulters, old nose coulters off of a Kinsey planter that I mounted the tubes in behind. It cuts a little smaller slot, but it's still very happy with it. It has less problems with wheat stubble and other things, and speed is less of a concern. I can get up to speed to where I can get the fertilizer rate that I'm looking for. The other benefit of that is I can wait a couple days and follow the manure spreader with a no-till drill and seed a cover crop. I don't have to level the field. I'm not waiting for a rain to get moisture because I lost it all due to the tillage process that was involved with the other injectors. And then it's usually seeded into a multi-species cover crop for a number of reasons. And I started with fairly simple. I've gone all the way up to 13, 14, 15 different species, and have now settled back down to oats as the base, along with something that's going to overwinter, usually a red clover and maybe volunteer wheat that's left in the field. And that cover crop will be band sprayed out. Happens to be a field of red clover, but the process is the same. Whereas I'm terminating a spot in the fall to prepare it for next year's production crop. So this is actually a manure applied volunteer wheat. There is a little bit of clover in there, and there's some cereal rye in there. My strips have been sprayed out the fall before. This gives me the flexibility to go in and seed, plant corn, sugar beets, or sunflowers at almost any time without being overly concerned about when I'm terminating that cover crop, and still have 80% ground cover or 80% living root system in the ground. It just creates a lot of flexibility around unpredictable weather. And this is what it looks like at planting. I try to, if at all possible, terminate before I plant so that when the crop is coming up, that the cover crop is pretty well died back and I don't get that green shade effect that you can get with corn if it sees something green next door. Like I said, I started with got into some pretty big custom or blends of all kinds of different species. And the reason I went back to a simpler blend is because I know what that simple blend is going to do. I'm not going to get surprises. The one picture here happened to be a year that was a perfect storm for sorghum Sudan, forage sorghum, all the above. They all grew tall. Had a long, warm, moist summer and fall. And this is a picture of the tractor trying to strip till through that cover crop. It couldn't band spray. I just had to try to pull the strip tiller through it. So that unpredictability of certain species, depending on weather, just decided to back off and go with something that I understand and wasn't going to give me a problem irregardless of weather. The other issue I had was some of these species would nicely make seed. The white flowers in the picture in the bottom there were a brassica that had decided to set seed. There were some pods on there already. Buckwheat was another one that could become an issue. None of these were probably going to be an issue in the spring with a herbicide application, but I just didn't need another weed that I was trying to fight. So for that reason, I've simplified the blend to, like I said, things that I understand. I've done a number of research plots, and Laura got to put her picture up, so I'm going to put my picture up. This was a 2-year study I did with Cameron Ogilvy and the University of Guelph on manure and cover crops with and without side dressed N, just to see, again, if my system was making sense. There was either 0 side dressed N or my full rate. From this, I kind of concluded that I didn't have enough with the manure without applying any side dressed N, and cover crop species didn't. I should back up. There's a single blend or single species, 4 species, and 12 species blends in there, and no cover crop. The only one that the single species was cereal rye, and there was some correlation between rye and corn with a yield deficit. So there's always something to be learned, but it seems like it creates more questions than answers usually. I've also done trials with in corn where I've done different rates of manure, or sorry, different rates of nitrogen with manure, and I'm kind of settling in on about 40% of my nitrogen requirements I can get from manure in this long-term system. So I'm quite comfortably uh, reducing the rate by about 80 pounds and still pretty confident that I'm going to get the same yields I would without manure with a full rate of nitrogen. A few of the other things that I consider while using manure, especially long-term manure, is I regularly soil test, monitoring phosphate levels on the farm. They are probably on the high end, and I have now started actually uh, sell some of the manure to a neighbor just because I don't want phosphate levels to creep up any higher. I mentioned earlier I have buffer strips along my water courses, and I'm working on and still trying to improve how I apply manure and tires on equipment and things like that to reduce compaction. So that's basically how I deal with manure on my farm. I'm sure there'll be some questions, but I'll stop sharing now.
Awesome. Woody, one thing I don't know, I should have mentioned the type of manure, the livestock that you have. What manure types are you dealing with?
Sorry, I forgot to mention it's hog finishing barn manure.
Awesome. Brilliant. Yeah, again, interesting stuff and some very pretty farming there too. You see those sunflowers and some very nice looking fields. All right.
Yeah, it's
Um,
PR.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so Woody, thank you very much, and let's go to our final presenter here, and then we'll circle back for questions altogether. So, pleasure to introduce Ken Schaus, and Ken, I'm sitting in Walkerton today. My office is Walkerton, Ontario, and Ken is not very far from me at home base of Schaus Land and Cattle. I've known Ken for a long time. Have a lot of respect for him, his dad, his business. I will tell you one quick personal story, and that is when I started working in this area 20 plus, 25 plus years ago, one of the first people that received me and toured me around to show me the area and what they were doing and so on was Ken and his father, Wally. And I've always appreciated that. I thought that was a smart move for me to be in the know, but it also was a very respectful move to make me aware, help me learn as a young guy that was pretty green behind the ears. So I've always appreciated that, Ken. But no, I'm going to turn it right over to you. Ken has some slides that we'll share and tell us your story, Ken.
Very good. Thanks, Andrew, and appreciate the introduction. And thanks, Christine, for inviting me. So we're farming in the Walkerton area. So from Tara to Clifford and into Gray County as well. We crop around 4,000 acres. Some of that land is long-term leased, and the balance is owned. Our crop rotation is corn, soybeans, and winter cereals, which is made up of winter wheat mainly, along with some cereal rye, which we take for grain, and then some winter barley as well. We're in our 15th year for cover cropping here, and total operations, cattle, and in the crop side of the business, there's 14 of us employed. Next slide, please. So I'll just give you a bit of an idea. Our cattle operation is a finishing operation, and we have 2 barns like this at Walkerton. There's one more going up here in the spring, and that's all solid bedding pack manure, which we compost. Next slide. So again, another picture of one of the barns. We feed very good cattle. They all originate out of Western Canada. Every animal in any one of these pens I can trace back fully where they came from, which ranch, and these barns have automatic curtains and fans and feed pushers, and I honestly think these cattle don't have a bad day from the time they enter these facilities. Next slide. So that's what our finished product looks like. We keep them well bedded, very comfortable, and we use a lot of straw. Of the 11 to 1,200 acres of cereals we grow, we bale all of it for bedding, and we also buy another 8 to 900 bales of some of the neighbors as well. So mainly straw. Sometimes we get into some corn stalk bedding as well, but for the most part, we like to just use straw. Next slide. So our wheat stands, we like to get them established early, and they get no-tilled into the soybean stubble. We grow an 06 soybean. It's an 06 to an 09, depending on planting date and farm locations. So next slide. So I'll walk you through a property we have up at Terra, and there's a 280-acre farm there on both sides of the road. We have the Sauble River cuts right through it, and the Sauble River is just at the northern boundary of this field here. It's a 101-acre field, and when we took the wheat off, as the last bales were being gathered, we were in that field along with the air seeder, putting a 12-way cover crop mix in. And then we start delivering the compost, and we don't spread any raw manure anymore. We've gone to a fully composted system, and we feel comfortable using it. The big part for us is if we go to deliver 10 ton of the acre of compost, and I've got 280 acres there, to make that equivalent amount of trucking manure that far isn't feasible. So compost it is, and this farm has the Sauble River, which cuts right through it. It's also a drinking water protection zone, and I feel comfortable in putting compost up on these locations. A farm beside the town of Chesley, beside the town of Walkerton, in the town of Hanover, and those are all things we want to keep doing with delivering compost. So this is just before the compost is going to be spread. That's what the cover crop looks like. So we're about, I think, around September 19th to 20th. We have a good crop there. Things are getting a little advanced, like the sunflowers. You can see them there, but for the most part, I feel comfortable that this is when and where manure should be applied. Next slide. So we terminated late in the season with the glyphosate. So April 18th, on that location where I took the picture, this is what the farm looks like. There isn't very much left there. You can see some remnants of some tillage radish holes. You can see some of the straw previously left. You can also see a lot of worm mindens and worm castings as well. The ground dries out very quickly, and May 14th, we did one pass with a high-speed Lumpkin Heliodor. I'm not a Lumpkin salesman. There's lots of other tillage tools out there that do every bit as good a job, I think. And, we're into basically a one-pass tillage. If it does need the second pass, it's probably on some farms that we've newly acquired, or, we just feel that the seed bed wasn't quite perfect. So that farm was planted on May 15th, which was the next day after that tillage. So next slide. So I'll touch a little bit on plant health, which I think is where the manure and the cover crops are really helping us a lot here. We're seeing stands of corn that they stay green throughout the entire growing season, and that stay green and healthy for us is the biggest part. That that puts starch into those kernels, that puts test weight into the kernels. We feed all our corn, and we feed a lot of corn. So the more corn I can grow, which is a higher nutrient content and higher starch levels, for us is better than trying to replace it with purchased corn. You can see what the corn looks like on the 15th and the 20th of July there. Next slide. So we get and this is right at our home farm. organic levels on that farm are about 4.5%. On July 1st and then the 27th, you can see some pretty rapid crop development there. Again, nice and green. Next slide. So July 29th and August 14th. So when we're doing our shallow tillage, we're not doing, we haven't put a shank in the ground and we haven't done any fall tillage for 15 years. And for us, that I think what we built is something that can handle heavy rains, it can handle some extended dry periods, which we seem to be getting more of. Those heavy rains, you get a 1 or 2 inch rain or 3 inch rain at times with some heavy slope ground. We find that that ground, how much rain we have, that's how much actually stayed on the farm with some of the slopes that we have. So for us, it was to build that sponge like subsurface. We want to have it so it can absorb those rains. And we also want to have it so when it does turn dry, this particular farm has a gravel pit on to the north and it's got one to the west of us. And I'm pretty sure there's gravel underneath it. So, we've got some highly susceptible soils to dry spells here. And we want to keep that moisture on the farm. Next slide. So October 1st, we're seeing some awfully good crop development here. One of our goals is to keep that plant as green as long as we can, like I said before, and pack as much starch and test weight into those kernels. November 1st was our combine date on this farm. And what we see is an excellent stand of corn. There isn't a lot of variability across the whole farm. And that was our last day of combining as well. So we had about 1,100 acres of corn in the ground, of which 100 was for silage approximately. And the rest was combine and taken as high moisture corn. Next slide. So on September 17th, we're cutting corn silage at Walkerton. And you can see the cob development there, nice plump kernels, slight dent, 65% moisture. I get a custom crew to come in and cut it. We get it done basically, or they get it done in 24 hours. I write the custom harvester's bill. Every year he seems to show up with a nice line of equipment. And, for us, it's just one thing that we can't have around for that much silage. So, that's our corn silage going in as part of the ration at the Walkerton Eerd. So next slide. So our manure is a big part of our compost. It's been manure over the years, but we switched to a compost program about 5 years ago, just because of logistics and where we were putting the manure. So, this year's after week, 10 ton of compost, we're probably going to put around 140, 50 pounds of pre-plant nitrogen out. We'll put 5 gallons of starter fertilizer and then 15 gallons of side dress nitrogen. One of the big things we have is, we're not sure how much we're getting out of the compost or how much we're getting out of the previous fertility application. So what we're going to do this year is we're going to leave some N0N strips and then some N-rich strips, and then take it to harvest and then do some yield calculations against the rest of the farm and some of the previous yields and see what we're actually getting out of the compost. So next slide. So October 14th, just another picture of this is our first field of corn that we got into. It was at 27% moisture at Walkerton. Again, nice and green still, full cob development, and good yields across the farm. We're seeing less variability over the years. This is the 15th year we've had this particular farm. Next slide. This is a newly acquired farm just down the road from us, so a 100-acre farm, 85 acres workable. It's well tiled. It hasn't had livestock manure for 20 years. The previous owner had it in wheat. The first thing we went in and did is SWOT mapped it. We put a cover crop in. And on October 26th, we applied 10 ton of compost. And then we terminated shortly after that. So, we're looking forward to seeing what we can do with this farm. Soil sample. And so that'll be going into corn this coming year. Next slide. So this was October 16th on the one farm over by Durham. And that's the kind of development you can see with things like turnip and radish and the nodulation on some of the cover crops as well. But what we are finding is that cover crop stands look as good as the corn stands now. So they're they're cycling nutrients. They're picking up a lot of that prior to us putting the compost on. And I think that's what we want to do is, we can put compost on at seeding, but we're kind of busy at that time as well with harvest. So for us to come in afterwards, we have the custom crew has the time to do it, but the cover crops look exceptionally good. They're obviously cycling a lot of nutrients and a lot of N, especially for us. Next slide. So that was quick, but that's kind of what we're doing. This was on all acres, so after the winter cereals, it's the same program across all the acres, and it's the same fertility program whether it's owned or leased land. And yeah, so I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards here.
Ken, I'm just going to ask you while we got you here. Tell the story in this. Like, this was a rented farm when you started. You've had it a few years. What have you been seeing with your program?
Yep. So the first, so leased land, and the previous, it's a 185-acre farm, one field. The previous crop, was wheat, but it had been cash crop, I would say, intensively for many, many years. And so the first year we went in with a cover crop. We went in with some liquid manure back when we had the slatted floor barns going. And our first crop of corn was 151 bushels. We talked previously, Andrew, about where we started. So a year of a cycle of corn, beans, and wheat again, coming back in with another cover crop. The 2019 corn crop was 188 bushels. Did the same thing for another 3 years. The 2022 crop was 216 bushels. And then this past year, we went in with 10 ton of compost. We did the wheat, the cover crops, and this year with the corn, the 185 acres went 238 bushels dry. So that's our highest yield that we've had on that farm. And for us, it's just we're still using commercial fertilizer. We're trying to get some answers what we're getting out of the compost and what we were getting out of the manure, but the stands just look so good. So this is right at harvest here, in end of October. So just a good stand of corn.
Wow, fantastic. Very good. Thanks for the presentation, Ken. So I'm going to invite Laura and Woody to join us now on the panel here, and we'll cycle to some questions as they're coming on. Ken, I'm just going to throw a couple your way that came up while you're talking. Somebody was asking, how deep is your spring disking?
Yep. So we're about a half an inch below seed placement, so that would be 3 inches.
Okay. And do you only feed grain corn on your operation, or do you also mix silage in?
Yep. So our ration is about 8 pounds of steam flake corn, which we purchase, 8 to 10 pounds of high moisture corn, 8 pounds of wet distillers grain out of a greenfield plant, and then about 8 pounds of corn silage, a pound of hay, about a half a pound of supplement, and a half a pound of molasses.
Awesome. Thank you.
And just as a note, Andrew, at 6.5:1 conversion, a lot of those cattle are gaining 4.3 to 4.5 pounds a day. I think not only the feed is nutrient dense, but the environment that these cattle are being raised in is incredible.
Wow. That's fantastic. Quinn, I'm going to get you after this next question I asked to pull up the first poll question, but just as you're getting that ready, a question came in the chat here, Ken and Woody. Any concerns that a manure application before a cover crop containing legumes is making the legume lazy and that you're not getting the full nitrogen credit possible from those legumes because of adding the manure? Woody, any initial thoughts on that?
Don't care. I'm not overly concerned whether the legumes are functioning. Legumes are a great scavenger. If they can get it for free, they'll take it. So I'm more concerned that they're taking stuff up than whether they're creating their own.
Ken, anything you want to add?
Yep. So I would say let them scavenge as much as possible. That's one of the reasons we've always gone with the manure on later.
Okay. And Laura, do you want to add anything too from the plot side?
I think whether they're lazy or not, you still get the nitrogen credit. It's more about the above ground and below ground growth from those legumes, like overwintering legumes, right? And then they decompose at the same time as corn has rapid uptake. And yeah, I think it's a nice system.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, Quinn, do you want to pull up that first poll and let's see folks in the audience here. And I realize some of you are not farming and maybe can't really answer this, but the question is this: how many years before you've seen on your farm or in your fields or in your research plots, whatever the case may be, where you've seen the benefits from the manure and the cover crops being applied? So is it short term? Is it 1 to 3? Medium term, 4 to 9? Or no, you're not seeing those until out beyond 10 plus years. So how long till we see those benefits? And once you get enough folks answering, then show us the results on that, Quinn. And again, I realize that this is a question directed at the farmers who are on the call, possibly the researchers as well. But let's go with that. What do we got? Okay, so yes, like it's basically 70% are seeing in the short term right away, seeing some of those benefits. Ken, are you surprised by those answers?
No, not really. I always think when the cover crop goes in, it's the soil looks like it just does when we break up a hay stand. Alfalfa hay stands have been in for 3 to 5 years, and well, that ground looks mellow and easy to plant into, and early emergence. Those are all things that we've seen after the first round of cover crops.
Yeah, and Laura, you're smiling at that result. Your thoughts?
I love it. I love it. And it's consistent with what 5 years ago with the Ontario cover crop feedback survey that was done in Ontario and the prairies, right? The farmers consistently tell us they see benefits earlier than we might expect.
Woody, same?
Yeah, yeah, you start to see benefits fairly early. I think, you're gonna see even more in 4 to 9 years. It's just gonna keep getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, for myself. So, Ken, knowing you initially as a cattle guy, and you still are a cattle guy, but now you're a cattle and a crop guy, and integrating those two. Was what made that decision? Like what to pull those two together, and then the cover cropping. What was the impetus?
I guess what got us going is we used to graze a lot of these farms, and the neighbors were $8 corn, so that was part of it. When the green energy all came on and the ethanol plant boom started, so for us it was let's break some of these farms up, and we started looking for some ways of doing it because we had some highly erodible soils, and we just didn't want to keep doing it the way didn't want to see our topsoil leave. Farms are too expensive, and so for us to get into the cropping side of it, we wanted to do it in a way that you know I don't want to say environmentally friendly, but we wanted to do it in a way that didn't require a lot of tillage because didn't have any farm equipment.
Yeah.
We had a 4-wheeler and fences. So for us it was we're starting with a clean slate. We didn't own a plow, so we didn't have to worry about but we just didn't own any equipment. So we started buying the equipment. And then we were on a limited budget, and the next thing we knew, we were planting corn. And we've always had a CCA that we could call on. Even now, we have Blair Freeman that helps us with all the decisions when it comes to fertilizer and fertility and
Yeah. And Woody, you took ownership of the farm. I think it was 91. What was your motivation? Like you've been plowing. I hate to use the word plow, but you've been plowing a path.
Oh, it started way back in high school, so, and I had a father that was not overly concerned about worrying about what the neighbors thought neither, and would try different things. So I just always have had an interest in soil sustainability. So manure and cover crops and utilizing them has always been a part of it.
Yeah. Right on. So we're getting near the end here. You can see the QR code is up and the KSC code will be up, but we're just going to keep chatting here. So folks, just a reminder, this is recorded. This will be posted and available probably by the end of the week. And next week, we're going to have a great session on From Pit to Profit, where we're going to show some video clips of some farmers and their systems, interesting systems for managing kind of an integrated approach to manure, with sand bedding and other things. So Mel Limas will be joining us as we have a conversation around those as well. So a great discussion again next week. But we're going to keep going and addressing some of the questions that are on the chat here. And if you need to leave as the hour comes up, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. Ken, somebody's asking about composting. Are you doing that for reducing transportation costs or the environmental benefit?
So I guess transporting manure for us to the Terra farms from Walkerton is it's a big truck ride. And then you have to have a decent place to store it and drinking water protection zone, the Sable River, getting enough manure spread, when it all has to happen. So we decided a few years ago, let's see what kind of compost we can make. We started making a very high quality compost, and our biggest backlog holdup was the curing time. So 6 months properly cured compost that created some fairly large piles. So now we're trucking out a cured compost from a dedicated facility.
Uh,
And so along with that, you know, there's something in it. I've got the soil test for the compost here. There's 61 pounds of N, and but what else is in there? If you at the best you might have 2,050 pounds left over from NP and K and sulfur. There's got to be something. The biology, the organic matter, the biology. I still can't get my head around it. So.
Yeah, right on. There is another question here about the compost, Ken, wondering any consideration to applying it before the cover crop, disking it in, and then no-till in the spring.
Yep. So as far as again, disking it in, I think it doesn't need to happen. But the ground is literally covered with earthworms. The earthworm middens are look like they're about every 6 to 7 inches apart. And when you dig, there's literally 3 layers of earthworms there. I don't think you have to do any disking of compost then.
Yeah, right on. You're reading Laura's mail right now, by the way. She's just getting excited about this. I know biology is something you've done some work on, Laura.
Yep. Yeah, you got your own biological tillers there, Ken.
Woody, there's a question here about crimping, rolling crimping. Comments on that. The question is looking at that rolling crimping cover crops like cereal rye instead of using different spraying techniques.
In the manure scenario, usually going into something like corn and sugar beets, I don't want to be dealing with roller crimp cereal rye in the spring. And I'll go back to my band spraying and strip till to get my planting zone while still leaving the strips in the middle, or my planting zones. And I want to roller crimping is very time sensitive as well. You want to control cereal rye. People has to be anthesis, and I'm looking at the end of May, first part of June. Roller crimping other things may or may not work. So I want it dead when the crop's coming up. So sticking to a herbicide program.
There's a comment that Carl makes. I'll just read it, and then Woody, I think we'll get you to start with your thoughts on it. Integrating cover crops with manure application, particularly using cereal rye or mixtures, can reduce nitrogen leaching by over 70% by acting as a nitrogen sink. Fall planted, fast growing grasses, rye, oats, are most effective at scavenging excess N from applied manure, while incorporating manure can minimize ammonia loss. Thoughts on that? So the incorporating it to reduce the ammonia loss versus the application, applying that and the scavenging. Thoughts on that?
There's a lot of stuff to unpack there a little bit, isn't there?
There is.
Uh, Ammonia loss is something that I'd like to do a better job of. That my shallow incorporation or minimum disturbance and manure incorporator, I think helps. there's other, I should go to other manure Mondays or to listen about how to minimize ammonia loss in manure. So that's something I'm looking at and thinking about. Geez, where else did we go in that comment?
Laura, jump in.
Oh, I think you've got it in terms of you're incorporating your liquid swine manure, right? So you're doing that good work in minimizing those losses, Woody, the ammonia losses. And Ken, I think you were going to jump in.
Yep. So we haven't done any liquid manure for about 3 years now, but after the corn silage comes off, we'll put some cereal rye in, and and we'll put, if there is some extra compost around, we'll apply it then. We have no-tilled soybeans into that cereal rye, which worked very well. Terminated it right after planting. I would probably, the year we did that, they were our best soybeans.
Just to touch up on that, where I sell my manure to my neighbor, he likes me to wait until his red clover is 12, 16, 18 inches tall. And with the injection system going into that cover crop, there's very little odor. So I'm assuming the ammonia levels, getting it under a cover crop, ammonium losses are reduced as well. Maybe Laura could
Yep.
comment better on that.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and Chris Brown makes comment in the chat that cured compost has no ammonium in. And the key word there, of course, is cured. Very key, because some people, when they call something compost, it's not cured compost. So it's important that that's included in what Chris is saying there. Another question came up on the timing. So when we're talking about losses, sort of minimizing that end loss, what are you thinking? How are you conscious of that in terms of timing of when you're applying the manure to cover crops? Ken?
Yeah, so we can't spread it all in one day. We kind of go in as we planted the cover crop, then that's usually the order that we spread the compost. And I hire a custom crew so they can get a lot of work done. They get 3 big spreaders. But we like to let the cover crop do as much scavenging as possible. And if it's the 10th or 5th or 1st of October that we get started, that's fine. So later into the growth of the cover crop.
Yeah. So, Laura, pretty exciting work that you've got done there, and those results. What's coming up the next 2-3 years? Where are you going next?
Yeah, we have lots on the go. We're trying to induce drought conditions in the long-term cover crop experiment. So we have rain out shelters across 3 rows to try to induce drought stress in corn and see how much that, well, we know organic matter is very important in terms of water holding capacity. And so if we could quantify that relationship between drought stress, organic matter, yields, that's what we're looking for. Fortunately, in Chatham-Kent, we had lots of rain for farmers. Wasn't so good for my drought experiment, but that's okay. I'll take it. I'd rather have everyone win than that one little experiment. Yeah, so we're trying to look at that, and then we're looking at a different experiment trying to stack BMP corn soybean rotation. Really, it's winter cereal rye, and if we stack rye cover crop and for our nitrogen management, maybe we can overcome some of those limitations that some people see with rye before corn by optimizing for our nitrogen management. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those. That's newly funded and really excited that it'll be at Winchester, New Liskeard, Elora, and Ridgetown. So we cover a nice part of the province in terms of the cover crop growth and for our nitrogen management in corn. Thanks.
Fantastic. I know we're past time here, but I do, Quinn, if you want to pull up that second poll question, whoever we still have a good number of folks here on, so I'm curious to see and this will lead into Woody, some of the comments you made. So, how much can you decrease your nitrogen application following manure and cover crops? So, whether this is on your farm again, or your research plot, or you've been involved in a project. But Woody talked about this. Woody, I think you said you're counting 40% of your N as coming from the manure. I think I heard you say. So you're accounting for that. Let's see what folks are saying. Saying that is it 10%? Is it up to 30%? Up to 50%? Or I'm not measuring. I'm not really sure, or I'm taking a guess at it. So Quinn, why don't you stop there and let's see what people are saying. So yeah, okay. People are certainly, a lot of people are accounting for the nitrogen in the manure. That's a good sign right off the bat. And okay, yeah, there's some high numbers there. I wasn't expecting. Woody, are you surprised by that, or?
I have no idea. Now, I thought about it after I clicked. It depends a little bit on your application rate as well.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Ken, any comments on what you see there?
No, I guess for us, we're going to leave some N0 N strips this year just to see how much we're actually getting. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess.
Right on. Wish we could keep going, guys. This is fantastic. So I want to say thank you to Laura. Thank you to Ken. Thank you to Woody. Great conversation today. Appreciate the work you guys are doing. You're all leaders in this area, and appreciate soil health is an important part of manure management. I just want to say that right up front. Even though this is the only session when we're directly talking about soil health, it's a very, very strong connection. And so more work to be done, but I'm thrilled with what's going on here. So thank you to our panel. Thanks for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next week, right here at March Manure Mondays. Cheers.